Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar of the CSG New Legislator Success Series. Our title today is Beyond Headlines, Navigating Your State's Criminal Justice Challenges. We are delighted that you are joining us. For those of you who have not attended one of our webinar series before, my name is Lorna Patches, and I am the Director of Leadership Development at the National Office of the Council of State Governments. CSG was founded in 1933 and holds a unique position as the nation's only organization serving all three branches of state government. As a nonpartisan organization, we provide comprehensive support to state leaders across the country. We also support state leaders in three essential ways. First, through our research team, we provide expert policy guidance to help you make informed governance decisions. Second, through our regular programs like our policy academies, which bring together multi-branch bipartisan teams from states to work on specific policy challenges with the guidance of national experts and peers from other states. And third, we offer exceptional leadership development programming and growth opportunities through programs like our Henry Toll Fellowship, which has been recognized as one of the nation's premier leadership development programs for state government officials. Today, you'll actually hear from some of our Toll alumni on our panel. We'd like you to think of CSG as an extension of your legislative staff offices and as a vehicle for your professional development. We're committing to helping you serve your constituents effectively, no matter where you are across the country. And today's webinar is a part of that commitment. We're focusing on criminal justice challenges and how the CSG Justice Center can support your work in this critical area. To introduce you to the CSG Justice Center, it is my pleasure to introduce our moderator for today, Interim Director of the Justice Center, Marshall Clement. As the Justice Center's Interim Director, Marshall provides strategic leadership to strengthen public safety and improve justice systems nationwide. During his 20-year tenure, he led the State Initiatives Division and Justice Reinvestment Initiative, partnering with policymakers in 27 states to develop data-driven policies, reducing corrections spending, lowering recidivism, and enhancing public safety. Clement has facilitated high-level policy discussions, worked with governors and legislators, and testified before legislative committees to drive evidence-based solutions. Marshall, thank you so much for leading today's conversation. I'll turn things over to you.
Thank you so much, Lorna. Appreciate it. Welcome, everyone. I want to tell you a quick bit about the CSG Justice Center. We have nearly 200 staff located across 33 states, and we are really here as a partner to you to help you as state leaders work to improve public safety and justice. We're working with leaders inside and outside of government across the country. We work with folks at the local, county, and state level to help the justice and behavioral health systems better collaborate, to help scale up reentry efforts, and help all agencies better report and utilize data to build a stronger, more trusted, fair, and effective system. If there's a challenge you're working on to address in your state, I'm confident that we have a way to partner to help you get the data, innovative ideas, and direct assistance you need to help take the next step. I'm excited to be here today with two incredible leaders that have partnered with the CSG Justice Center to drive change in their states and nationally, and we'll talk about what they have found works to lead on these critical issues of public safety. But before I introduce them, I want to share one big resource that we have for each of you. One of the biggest challenges we know you face is getting good data. By that, we mean data you can trust, data that gives you a clear system-wide view on your system, your justice system, data on your state, not somewhere else or national trends. And most often, we know you get reports from each individual agencies and budget hearings and the like. Courts tell you about caseloads. Counties tell you about jail workforce issues. Corrections tells you about prison staffing and capacity levels. But despite each agency all working with the same communities and people, and despite each agency's pressures cascading to others, it's very hard, we know as state leaders, to get a clear view of the system as a system. And that's why our researchers have pulled together over 70 national and state data sources, analyzed them, and organized it all into a single briefing book for each of you. Why is this so important? Well, we know to lead in this moment, you need data on your state. There's too much variability that we see in the data to rely on stories about national trends to guide you in this moment. So here's some of the questions the briefing book can help you answer. What's driving your state's prison population up or down? What type of crime is rising and which type is falling in your state? Are those committing crime being held accountable in your state? Are those arrested spending more or less time behind bars? Are people in your state who are sentenced to probation or reentering from prison more or less successful today than they were, say, a decade ago? And finally, how do workforce challenges that we know agencies across government are facing, whether it be law enforcement, prisons, or behavioral health agencies, how do those workforce challenges look in your state relative to the rest of the country? Well, all this data is critical. Even more helpful, we know, is a trustworthy expert to help guide you through the numbers on your state. And we're happy to be that guide at no cost anytime. You can call us to brief you one-on-one or your staff. You can ask us to come in and brief you and your colleagues during session or interim committees focused on improving your public safety system. So now I want to turn to some of the leaders who've led their states through some of the most historic changes to criminal justice policy. Both leaders that will join us have many lessons learned to share to how to tackle policymaking in this area, and we want to ask them to share some of those lessons learned with us. I know you'll enjoy the remarks and get a lot from their experience and wisdom. Joining us first from Illinois is Senator L.G. Sims. Welcome, Senator.
Well, thank you, Marshall, for having me. I'm so happy to be here and glad to engage in the discussion.
Thanks, Senator. So Senator Sims represents Illinois' 17th Senate District after serving nearly 4 terms as state representative. As a member of the Senate Criminal Law Committee, he's a leading voice in reforming Illinois' criminal justice system. He spearheaded comprehensive reform legislation, changing use of force policies and sentencing practices. And he led efforts to move Illinois away from cash bail through the Bail Reform Act of 2017. His committee assignments include appropriations, criminal law, judiciary, and telecommunications. He's also the national chair for the Council of State Governments and member of the CSG Justice Center Executive Committee. So with that, Senator, thank you so much for your leadership in Illinois and across the country and at CSG.
Thank you, Marshall. Yeah, this has been a labor of love for me for many years. Yeah, my work in reforming our criminal legal system, as you mentioned, it started in the House, but it started even before that. When I was in law school, I remember studying cases about the criminal legal system and the decisions that were being made and how that impacted the way communities were able to grow and thrive. And that fueled the work that I knew I wanted to do when I got to the legislature. So when I got to the legislature, I started working in this area, and my first chairmanship in the Illinois House was chairman of the House Judiciary Criminal Committee. And as you mentioned, that's where I really dug into some of these topics and spearhead the Bail Reform Act of 2017, where we tried to determine and make sure that you could figure out the difference between those violent and nonviolent offenders, because there are some folks who need help, who need assistance, who need treatment, and there are others who we are afraid of and are threats to our public safety. And we have to be able to differentiate between those two and figure out how we're going to inform policy and engage in policy that deals with them differently. Because if you have someone who is poor and a nonviolent offender, that person, and they may be trauma informed, or they may be involved in trauma, or they may have substance abuse, have a substance use and abuse disorder. That person should be dealt with differently than someone who is a threat to public safety. And you mentioned something that for me has informed the work that I have done, which is that data collection. Oftentimes, when we engage in policy making based on anecdote, that can be very dangerous, because there are stories that shock the system and there are stories that frighten and outrage us. But we have to divorce ourselves from those realities and look at the data. And that's what we've tried to do. And the Justice Center has been a tremendous partner in doing that work. Be someone who can come and provide that dispassionate data, that objective nonpartisan, not just bipartisan, but nonpartisan data that talks about what we are seeing, the trends that we are seeing, what's happening in Oklahoma, or what's happening in Alabama, what's happening in Minnesota or Illinois, and being able to look at what those trends are and how we can improve policy overall. And I think that's really it's been a blessing to have a partner who can do the work that we see and we need it helps and inform our policy decisions.
Absolutely. So, Senator, you mentioned so much there I want to pick up on, but one thing just mentioning that, when we talk about any number of the challenges in the criminal justice system that we may be needing to tackle, or that may be coming before the state legislature, often those issues start with emotion and anecdote, right? A particular case or a concern that gets lifted up. But to make good policy, as you said, you need to move from that anecdote and emotion to clear data and solid analysis. I'm curious, just as you think back, when you started in the legislature to where you are now, what are some of the biggest lessons learned in terms of how we could talk policy. I also want to talk process, for new legislators that are excited to take on these issues. What are some of the biggest, lessons learned in terms of how to go about taking up an issue that you've decided you want to really make a priority, given all the stakeholders and all the data and all the research and all the advocacy groups out there? What are some of the lessons learned that you've kind of accumulated to make successful, good policy move?
Great question, Marshall. Patience. I would say patience is one of the things you learn as part of this work in particular. You mentioned the Bail Reform Act of 2017, and that was part of an overall strategy to figure out how we're going to improve the criminal legal system. But that doesn't happen overnight. Because you did the Bail Reform Act of 2017, which was coupled with in Illinois, we set the body camera protocols in 2015. So all those things built to when we passed the Safety Act, which was the most comprehensive criminal legal system reform bill that Illinois has ever seen, which included the Pretrial Fairness Act, which is the elimination of cash bail. That didn't happen until 2021. So when I talk about patience, it happens over time, and you have to understand that incremental change is not a bad thing, because it gives you the opportunity to see how the changes will work. When we originally passed the Pretrial Fairness Act portion of the Safety Act, in the elimination of cash bail, there was this hue and cry that there was going to be, complete upheaval to our criminal legal system. Well, after there's been training and the system is in place. Our Supreme Court has put rules into place. We had a hearing in the Senate Appropriations Committee recently, as you mentioned. I chair the Senate Appropriations Committee. We had hearings from both our state Supreme Court, our statewide appellate prosecutor, and now our statewide appellate defender, and all three of them routinely agreed, categorically agreed, that the Pretrial Fairness Act is working. You are seeing that the individuals who are threats to public safety, they're being detained. Those individuals who need the treatment, they are getting it. So it does take time, but it also takes a commitment to the improvements that we put together. And I'm proud of that work. But even though that's working, we still have more to do.
So I heard patience. Why does it take time? Because you got to get good data. You got to get the stakeholders around the table to come to some consensus, and you can't change overnight. You got to build steps along the way and show a track record that things are moving in the right direction to make to the next step. All excellent pieces of advice. I want to turn to our other panelist, Director Cam Ward, who's joined us.
Absolutely.
Ward directs the Alabama Bureau of Pardons and Paroles, overseeing all agency operations supporting the Alabama Board from 2011 to 2020. He served in the Alabama State Senate, chairing the Senate Judiciary Committee for 9 years. And in 2014, Governor Bentley appointed him chair of Alabama's Prison Reform Task Force, guiding Justice Reinvestment Initiative in Alabama. Director Ward previously served 2 terms in the Alabama House of Representatives. He's also currently serving as the chair of the CSG Justice Center's Advisory Board. Director Ward, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for being a little tardy, but good to be on with you guys. Thank you for having me.
That's all right. So Director Ward, we're talking about lessons learned as in your case, as well as Senator Sims, been in the legislature for a number of years. Now you're in the executive branch, leading an agency, implementing some of those policies. We have in our audience and folks watching new legislators who may be interested in taking up criminal justice policy matters. Lessons learned from your experience in the legislature guiding bipartisan criminal justice policy improvements like the Justice and Reinvestment Act in 2014, 2015, and obviously many years of implementation. We've heard about the importance of data, we've heard about the importance of gathering stakeholders. Curious about what stands out for you as the most important kind of lessons learned as you look back and think about what you wish you'd known as a new legislator in Alabama who wanted to tackle these issues.
Well, first of all, thank y'all for having me on. And I will say this, when you go to the legislature, you have 20 different issues hitting you at the same time at a minimum. So it's hard to spend more than 1 or 2 minutes on every subject. Well, oftentimes criminal justice has to be spoon-fed. I wish I had known some of that when I first got started. And interestingly enough, when I came to this job after serving nearly 20 years in the legislature, I knew about 10% of what I needed to know when it comes to criminal justice reform, despite all the work we did. I would say one of the highlights I have is, or one of the things I could point to is using the Justice Center as a tool has been greatly helped me tremendously back when I was in the legislature and now, because it's data driven. And you hear this a lot, but the Justice Center provides a great support network. It provides great data, provides great infrastructure to kind of guide you through the sticky issues depending on what your state's facing. We did that when I did the 2015 Justice Reinvestment Initiative Act, and that data helped us pass that law. And it was hard, but it was bipartisan cooperation on it, worked great, but we couldn't have done it without that technical assistance from the Justice Center. That was a big deal. And we also have gotten involved with Stepping Up Act. We've also gotten involved with partnerships with Department of Mental Health and other sister agency partners that somehow may not be directly involved in the criminal justice system, but they definitely touch it. So those are 2 big areas I would suggest. The data coming from the Justice Center, huge benefit. Wish I'd known that when I first came in the legislature. And then the second being that ability to have that kind of cross-agency cooperation.
Excellent. Thanks, Director. So 2 themes. How, as a legislator, do you get up to speed on all you need to know from across all the agencies that make up the justice system to effectively help design new policy approaches and improvements? So how do you move from kind of an agency by agency siloed approach to thinking about how all that wraps up into a system that is our criminal justice system at the state level? And then also just how do you bring those stakeholders together and build consensus in a process like you talked about, Director? So I'd love to hear your thoughts, Director, and then we'll go back to Senator Sims and similar question.
Well, I would say one of the things we did, so I established when I took on this current role, is a reentry commission. As a reentry 2030 state, I really believe that the only way you can accomplish meaningful post-incarceration recidivism reduction is to get people out of their easy spots, get them into a spot where they start talking with each other. We now have 12 cabinet heads that meet once a month to discuss different ways we can collaborate. It doesn't even require a new law, requires support from the legislature, but really no new laws. It's basically, what are we doing now? And how do we change that together with the tools we already have? And that interagency collaboration has really educated me, because I see things like, oh, wow, I didn't know you do this at mental health. Oh, I didn't know you did this at Department of Human Resources or Medicaid. But we wouldn't have been able to do that without the support staff, again, from the great folks at the Justice Center. The Justice Center has someone in Alabama, y'all down here right now, working with us on some reentry issues. And that kind of support, here in Alabama, we're a part-time legislature. So when I was a senator, I had 1 staff member, and that 1 staff member was my clerk. So you didn't have a support staff like you do in many places. So having outside groups come in that you can trust, that's the biggest thing, and data that you can trust, that really kind of lays the roadmap for you how you move forward.
Excellent advice. Thanks, Director. Senator Sims, I'm just curious, as you were for any number of policy measures, but certainly thinking about the Safety Act and the pretrial reforms that Illinois has adopted. I'm sure there were lots of stakeholders with lots of different opinions that you had to bring to consensus. And as Director Ward was mentioning, right, I mean, the system's only as good as the amount of collaboration and coordination that's happening across all the agencies. And state policymakers like yourself and Director Ward are critical to making that collaboration happen. But that's just making the system run as it is. Making big changes or significant changes to improve outcomes for public safety requires a whole nother level of coordination and engagement. Tips for how state leaders, state policymakers can play that critical role in bringing all the different stakeholders to the table, and then secondly, fostering consensus around some of these issues?
Marsha, great question, and I think we were talking earlier, I was thinking back to those countless hours where we were in the room with all of the stakeholders, and I've had the honor of being able to do this over a number of times. So you have to bring the stakeholders together, and I think you start with some ground rules, and those ground rules are everybody's trying to get to a better outcome. And when you recognize that the goal is a better process, and that helps. As we were negotiating the Pretrial Fairness Act and the Safety Act in particular, we had 9 public hearings and 30 hours of testimony, but that doesn't account for the countless hours that happened outside of those public hearings. So I remember sitting in committee hearings for a couple of hours where we would have a presentation on one topic or another, and then going back and having discussions with folks like the Justice Center to get information about what we just heard, or to prepare for the upcoming or another topic. And that's where, again, the resources like the Justice Center are invaluable, because they are partners who you can trust, partners who will share information with you, and they don't have an agenda other than good, sound policy. And that's what helped inform our decision making. And even when we disagreed about a particular point or another, we were able to agree that the ultimate goal was a better process. And I think that's, and when you come to the policy making from that perspective, and you put aside the partisanship, you put aside the tribalism, and you focus on the sound policy, you have better outcomes.
A great point. You gotta start with and come back to, when things get tense, the common goals that everyone around the table is working towards to keep stakeholders working in the right direction. Another theme we've seen in criminal justice policymaking is that a lot of the changes, a lot states are making a lot of changes over the last 2 decades to reduce recidivism, to improve accountability for people who are committing crime, to better integrate behavioral health services, mental health, and substance use services into the criminal justice system, and to divert folks to those services where appropriate, or where it can produce better public safety outcomes as well as health outcomes. But a lot of those shifts had 2 elements. I want to take them in turn. The first is moving away from some old ideas that are pretty persistent in how we think about criminal justice policy. I remember when my daughter came home from preschool and told me about putting people, someone had done something bad, and you put them in jail. And I was like, how did this idea already get planted as this is just the default response to bad behavior? So we got a lot of old ideas about how to change behavior, how to hold people accountable. That doesn't always comport with a lot of the research that's developed over the last 2 decades about what works and what actually can improve public safety for communities. Director Ward, how do you think about, and what have been some of the best tools in your toolbox for helping move stakeholders and your state in the conversation from some of the default responses that we've had for 100 years to how to deal with the problem of public safety and crime, to appreciate some of the lessons that we're learning from the sound research and other state examples around the country?
Well, first, I think that one thing you have to instill with policymakers who have to make these decisions, is don't be afraid of Cam, you can't talk about this. You're going to get beat. You live in a very Republican district. You're basically 90% Republican district. You're going to get beat talking about this. I never had an opponent, even when I first ran for the Senate all the way to the end, and this was my number one issue. So don't be scared of it. You just have to sell it in a way that works. And that way is understanding that lawmakers, and I was one of them, so Senator, don't get upset with me saying this, oftentimes lawmakers have the attention span of a Cocker Spaniel. It doesn't last very long. So criminal justice came about, that scenario you just mentioned, Marshall, was developed because it was easy. Just put them in jail. Let's move on to the next thing. Let's move on to schools, whatever. What we did was we started gathering, and much like Senator Sims said, getting people in a room. What do you call success? And the line I always use is, if I throw you in a cage and let you out of the cage in 10 years and you do nothing in between that period, you were bad when you went in, you're really going to be bad when you get out. So first you have to sell the notion that there are other programming needs out there. Second, I do think, and we use this a lot, is we have a behavioral resource model where we score and determine, of course, everybody uses, I think, OASIS now. Oh, I'm sorry, ORAS. But everybody who uses ORAS, we do a scoring mechanism. How do we score them to make sure that they're getting the appropriate level of attention based upon what their risk is? And you can't put a cookie cutter approach on every single individual in the criminal justice system. I will say that one of the things the Justice Center greatly helped me with was every time I had an issue on data going, what is Georgia doing? Or what is Mississippi doing? What is Missouri doing? I could call up and say, oh, go here and look at this, and here's our list of what they're doing compared to your state. I find a lot of times in lawmaking, looking at what other states do comparable to what your state does helps tremendously in as far as getting information out there and pushing across a finish line. And then finally, I will say, just to be honest with you, the meetings we have when we're all together talking and sharing notes on what we're seeing in the various states, I learn a lot from other people who are involved in the Justice Center, telling me their stories. They're good, they're bad, and they're ugly. And it allows me to go home and kind of turn and pivot to make sure we're doing it the right way as well. But you learn from others, and those dialogues and those forums really help a lot.
That's great, Director. So it's not easy work, right? What's easy may be easy to sell, but it's not easy to achieve the outcomes we all want in terms of improved public safety. It's going to take clear communication. Go ahead.
I was just going to say quick one thing. I always told everybody, you could never put on a bumper sticker on a car that says, vote for me because I'm going to fix prisons. It doesn't work. We're criminal justice. It's got to be, you got to sell it as a way that everybody benefits from the improvements you're trying to make, even those who haven't been touched yet by the justice system.
That's right. So what is success? You asked, to kind of bring everyone back. What is public safety? What does success look like? And I think, for a lot of, I know for your conversations in a lot of other states, it's been reducing recidivism. And the proof is in the results. We either are or we aren't reducing recidivism. And one study we published last April, about a year ago now, showed that overall state level 3-year reincarceration rates have dropped 23% since 2008 when the Second Chance Act was passed. So we have real, but there's not every state fell the same amount. We have some states where recidivism went up. And so there's real state examples, as you mentioned, Director, to point to and learn from about how to do this. You mentioned the ORAS. I just wanted to, for our listeners, that's the Ohio Risk Assessment System developed by researchers in Ohio. And many states have adopted that and applied that to their system to understand who's most likely to reoffend, so we can target both supervision and services and supports for those individuals to improve their outcomes. Senator Sims, similar question to you, as well as maybe on the politics of this, which Director Ward brought up, right? A lot of old ideas that persist about how to easily respond, but maybe they work as a tagline, but don't work, when we actually look at the results and the costs involved in them. So how did you help? Any tips for new legislators in terms of how to move new ideas, new research, and innovation that we're seeing happen across the country to the work and policymaking in your own state?
Yeah, Marshall, I mean, I think as legislators, we have, there's the policy and then there's the politics. Edmund Burke once said that, no power so effectively robs the mind of rational thought than fear. And, and if fear didn't sell, it wouldn't be good politics. And that's why you have to lean into with the reality of the policies. and what those policies mean. And that means, in that respect, I often say I lean into the three bone theory: the backbone, the wishbone, and the jawbone. The backbone, you've got to have the courage to lean into this policy, because this is not easy work, because you are going to there inevitably there's going to be a situation where one person does something that is that story that shocks the system. So, what you've got to have the backbone to stand up and know that you are doing the right thing and um, trying to get good sound policy done. You've got to have the wishbone. The wishbone is the thinking about what success looks like, and you have to have the vision to think about how you're going to achieve those sound policy outcomes. Then you got to have the jawbone, and the jawbone, you're gonna have to go out. You have to go out and talk about it. You have to go out and you have to sell folks. In the district I represent, it is a very diverse district. I've got city of Chicago. I've got the suburbs of the city, and I've got rural Will and Kankakee County. So I got very different and divergent positions and perspectives. But I always talk about, and every time I'm in his town, I go and see him. There's a constituent of mine. We could not be more different politically. We're very different, but he says to me, Senator, I vote for you, and I'm going to keep voting for you, because even when we disagree, you come and you talk to me about it, and you hear my perspective. And I think that's critical for this kind of work. We've got to be willing to lean into it and say, why are we doing what we're doing? What are we trying to achieve? What are we trying to accomplish? What does success look like? And when you can lean into that bone theory, I think your good outcomes happen.
A great thing to close on. Director Ward, any final thoughts from you, and then we'll turn to some questions and answers if we have any.
Well, I was just going to say, Senator Sims covered a lot of what I wanted to say just now. The most important thing is, and how you sell it in every state. I'm like you, Senator. I go and speak to people and kind of talk about this issue. But the one thing I try to couch it in is reentry successfully, or pretrial diversion, or successful therapies and training on the inside. That means public safety. That is a public safety benefit. It makes the public safer. I have a three-legged stool approach. I believe that successful reentry and successful basically reform of anybody who's been touching the justice system relies in three things: one, mental health; two, substance abuse treatment; and three, and finally, good, solid job training. I think those three are the foundation, and upon that, you can build a good public safety system, starting from the beginning when they touch the justice system all the way to the end and when they come out. So I believe that, one, we have to sell it as a public safety. It is public safety. It wins. If we do this better, less people commit crime and more people are paying taxes, and we have a healthier community. So I think by selling it that way and talking to people, and it is a sell, you do have to sell it. But I think when you have an honest conversation with people like that, they get it, and you can see them nod their head. They may not be 100% with you, but they do see the logic where you're coming from, and it kind of taps down some of the fears out there.
Great advice, Director. Senator Sims, thank you so much. If you have questions you'd like to pose to the panelists, please put them in the chat, and we'll get to them. One question that already came in, I believe, is in addition to the data available in the data snapshots we shared the link to earlier that the Justice Center developed, if a legislator is interested in engaging the Justice Center in their state for support, what would that look like, and what are different levels of individual state support available? Lauren, if you could put my email address in the chat, that would be great. Please just reach out to us, and we will set up a time to talk and hear about what challenges you're eager to address. Bring data to the table that might help inform some areas to look at, and we can talk about a number of different projects that we have already support from both philanthropic and federal agencies to help states address these challenges. Those range from helping reduce violent crime by working with local law enforcement and state crime labs to improve clearance rates and result in more people being held accountable for violent crime in your state. That looks at diversion for law enforcement who are coming into contact with people in behavioral health crisis, and how to stand up either alternative response, co-responder, or other models for improving outcomes for that initial response to the call for service. that looks at our juvenile justice policies and our policies affecting youth mental health and coming into contact with the juvenile justice system and how to improve outcomes on that front, all the way through courts to corrections, improving outcomes on supervision, and for people released onto parole. So the whole spectrum of the criminal justice system, we have ways to assist states and existing policy academies, approaches, and resources we'd love to connect you with. But the most important thing is really understanding where you're at and what the challenges are you're looking to face, and we can start there and meet you where you are. That can look like a one-off response and resource or data point or reference to another state example, or that could look like a 2-year engagement. Some of the ways in which you heard Director Ward talking about how we worked with him and the legislature in Alabama to really dig deep and do a whole system assessment about what was driving both corrections costs and recidivism, and develop new ways on a bipartisan basis with all the stakeholders, prosecutors, sheriffs, victim advocates around the table to devise a new approach that would work better and produce better outcomes at lower costs. So it really varies, but it starts mostly with what you're focused on and what your needs in your state are. Unless there's any other questions, Lorna, I want to thank Senator Sims and Director Ward for their time, for their sound advice. I hope it's been useful to all of you listening, and please don't hesitate to reach out if the Justice Center at CSG can be helpful to your efforts. Lorna, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Marshall. And I would just like to echo your thanks. Thank you to you and to Senator Sims and Director Ward. I cannot think of a better example of our Toll Fellow community working across the aisle to make great improvements for their states. And hopefully this has sparked some interest not only in the work of the Justice Center, but also in the Henry Toll Fellowship. Our applications are open now through May 1st. So if you have been inspired today, I encourage you to consider applying. We bring our Toll Fellows to Lexington, Kentucky, the national headquarters for the Council of State Governments, together in August. And then we also gather together at the national conference, which this year will be in our national chair state. LG Sims will be in Chicago this coming December. So we're very excited about that. Whether you're interested specifically in our new Legislator Success Series webinars, our Toll Fellow program, or just want to learn more about other educational offerings provided by the Council of State Governments, please feel free to email us at membership@csg.org. We can encourage you to participate in various things and provide resources to our policy academies and other practical tools for you as a new legislator in your state. Our final webinar of the new Legislator Success Series will be next Friday, and I hope you will be able to join us. We will be introducing you to your CSG regional offices, which are the backbone of what we do in the states across the country. That will be, again, next Friday, April 4th at 2 p.m. Eastern. I really hope you'll be able to join us for that final session and learn more about your regional directors and the specific resources available for you from those regional offices. Until then, thank you again for joining us, and be well.